the name of the talk is 10 key things about being a rocking product manager, but I will throw you some curveballs and some bonuses around it. I will be obviously talking about the main responsibilities of being a product management, main skills you should have, what this role is and is not, what this job is and is not, what are some challenges you might have, and some insider tips. But I'll be talking about something that is a bit, especially if you're in Agile or Scrum, a little bit of let's say an opposition between PMs and POs. So what a product manager or product owner is, and also project manager. So with that, let's go to it. Before we start though, I do want to share a short story with you. And of course, you know, your mileage might vary, but this is a little bit of an introduction. Let's call it, this is a story about Caesar. Caesar was a programmer, very young age, started at 14, 15 years old. He was programming for fun, for courses, for university. He then actually started to get paid for what he was doing by developing as a lead developer in university, as a researcher. There's research grants here in Europe you might know of. So this was something I was doing. Then I became an actual software engineer because I finished my course in software engineering in a master thesis, which was actually about PSP more than TSP, because TSP is quite bigger. It was focusing improvement, automatic improvement recommendation and performance analysis. That's the name of the thesis. Then I became a consultant in both software and process improvement. So this is where my career started to move a little bit. Then I became a project manager, actually, you know, building something, keeping track of things, working with a cross-functional team. After that, I co-founded a startup, B2B, software as a service, where I was, you know, CTO, but as anyone here that worked in a startup knows, I was a bit of everything. So it's not that CTO role was the, you know, as a CTO of a bigger company. So throughout all of this, and here's my first question to you, what do you think is the commonalities in all of this, in being a programmer, a developer, in this case in a university setting, a software engineer working for a company, a consultant, both in software and process improvements? I know we have here some. In being a project manager, I'm sure all of you already did that role in the past, one way or another, or, you know, working C-level, if you will. What is all the commonalities here? Give me like something that comes up to your mind. You can just, you know, unmute and speak. Anything pops up?
Software.
Okay, that's one. Software, yes, for sure. More?
System.
Okay. What's that, sorry?
System thinking.
System thinking. I did not thought about that. That's a good one. I was expecting software. I did not think about
Team
that.
working.
Value.
Okay.
Let's always focus on product value for the customer.
Yeah, when you're sitting there, huh? But okay. Any more? So I was fishing for something, which Alan kind of touched a bit, which is, oops, sorry, I jumped over it. I wanted to go here, which is product. So product is actually something that it doesn't come up straight away in your mind when you're talking about all of those roles, which in this case was my own personal journey until 2014, I believe. It's something that you obviously saw a lot of commonalities, software, thinking about the systems thinking. There's a lot of other things, but one thing I never actually came to my mind until I actually started my product career, let's say it officially, after I left my startup, was in all of these cases, in everything I was doing, I was always working in a team and always working on a product, even if it was a project for a product. If it was developing something, a plugin, a ticket support, whatever, it was always for a product. And it was something that it only became clear for me that the value capturing, obviously it's important for anyone that is working in a team, creating a product or working in software engineering, but this person is the accountable. It doesn't need to be a person, but normally it is. But it can be depends on the terminology, depends on the approach you are taking to this. If it's Scrum Product Owner, there's many names you can take, and I will talk a little bit about that. But it's something that it's really hard to define too. What is a product? You know, if you're working in a BI team, is maybe a Power BI report, is that a product? If you work in a service supporting other, how do you call it, like a support team, what is the product on that? So it's also not easy to define what it is. And it's one of the things I saw also when I was working in companies that were going through Agile transformations, is that it's hard to define what the product is. Because if you're doing Scrum, you'll have a product owner. What is that product owner really owning? What is that team really working towards? What is the value? So this is something just food for thought, because you know, you might be asking, even though Julia already mentioned a little bit about my path, you might be asking, you know, who am I? Why should you listen to me and take my word for anything I'm saying? Well, you probably shouldn't. You know, take this as food for thought as we go through all these 10 things about being a product manager. And maybe in the end, we can talk a little bit more about that, and we can follow up later if you have more questions. And I'd love to talk about this transition of these worlds that I saw before, you know, very focused in process, and now more towards the product side. With that, let's carry on. So any questions so far? I will leave time for questions in the end, but since we're a smaller group of people, we can have questions throughout the presentation. There's no problem. We have time for that. Okay. So responsibilities, you know, this is not a thorough explanation about what the role is, because we're gonna highlight some, oops, sorry, I jumped. I'm gonna highlight some things that you should be really thinking about if you're a product manager, although there's many other things you're gonna be doing. And again, we're gonna be diving a little bit into this a little bit later. So developing product roadmaps. This is not a Gantt chart, obviously. It's more than that. It's how you actually translate into some sort of guide what you're going to be doing to meet the business goals, to meet the customer needs, to actually come up with a product that creates value. So it's not just, it's more than creating a Gantt chart when you're a project manager. It's something that hopefully, while you are doing that, is already delivering value and will go towards the business goals and the customer needs. There's a lot about, this is something I don't see in a lot of companies that have the role. User research, sometimes this is just a separate team. It's not that you cannot have a separate team, but this is something the product manager must live and breathe. They need to understand the user, be an expert on that area of the product they are working on, to be able to actually incorporate this into the product development, obviously. Market analysis. This is probably one of the things I've seen the least. Everyone just jumps into building something without trying to understand everything around it. Like, what are the trends in that market? What are the competitors? Who is maybe already tried to build something similar that you're trying to build? This is something that is a lot of times overseen, especially if you're just a product manager that was hired to continue something that is already underway. And I've done that. All of this is something I have already faced myself, and I kind of failed. I was like, okay, I should have done that first. And this is another one. Prototypes or POCs, proof of concepts, or just testing before you start developing something. This is very important. You need to be hands-on with the team and the design, sometimes even working side to side and creating this POCs or prototypes or whatever you want to call it, but testing it before you actually build the whole thing to make sure you're actually meeting the user needs. This is something, these are our responsibilities, or the ones I've seen missing the most in product management. There's obviously more than them, and we're going to be talking about some of them as we move forward. So another one, number 2, actually, skills that are important if you want to be a product manager or if you're thinking about product. One is obvious, strategic thinking. Keep jumping forward. Strategic thinking. So, you know, in order to be able to be, a product manager is a visionary, or should be a visionary. In order to be that, you need to be able to kind of think about the strategy, the product, how it ties to your business needs and to your business goals. And you need to think big also, right? So you need how can this be scaling? Maybe you're building a new product, it's 0 to 1, but you should also be thinking about what about the 1 to 100? So it's this type of thinking, something that doesn't come naturally to everyone. Collaboration. This is something that's probably obvious to many of you that work in teams, especially from this setting where we are today of the SEA, sorry. But working cross-functional teams is essential for success. So you need to be able to work with many people, to be over-communicator. You need to be communicating so much that people get tired of listening to you and hearing you saying the same things. Actually, this is something some members of previous teams told me about me, is that I was repeating so much the same things about the product. They were sick of it, but those were the key things about the product. So it's important to keep repeating it, even though everyone says they already know what it is. Data, again, a group of people that probably I'm preaching to the choir here, but it's super important to inform your decisions, to measure the success of the product, to actually know you're making an impact, and also to understand where you may be failing. So it's not only the things that are being used, sometimes are the things that are not being used. I have examples of that in my past, building products that are building features for products that they were not being used as we thought. Many reasons for that. Some of them user research that led to that. But the outcome was that the feature was not being used by anyone. So what is the next step? You need to also have some, to have the braveness to remove features from your product. That is something I actually did not bring here too much, but it is something that a product manager needs to be able to do. Sometimes kill some parts of the product, to kill a little, even kill your own baby. In this case, it's not it doesn't sound good saying out loud, but it's something that you must be able to accept and do. Agility. This is not necessarily about Agile, but about having flexibility to be able to pivot. Sometimes you may be focusing on a product that is, B2B, but it was supposed to be to big companies. But then you understand actually the little ones need this more. So you need to change your pricing structure. You need to change maybe to freemium version. You need to change the way you approach also the delivery. Maybe you need to do more releases. If you're just doing, for big corporations, sometimes long release cycle is okay. For small corporations, that's not so much. For SMBs, right? Small and medium businesses. So be agile. You need to thrive in this situation. Let me just grab a cup of water. So how to excel in product prioritization. So this is number 3. I selected this as number 3 because when I was already managing other product managers, one of the things I saw is that they had a big difficulty sometimes, especially the junior ones, to prioritize what the team should be working on. It sounds simple, right? But it's not that simple, especially if you're a junior and you don't know that the business or the product that well. Why do I say that? Well, one of the things, obviously, it should be crystal clear for the team. What are the goals? They need to be very much aligned with their business objectives. You should prioritize these features also based on projects or sprints, if you will, that actually support these goals. Depends on the structure that you're using to implement this. And this brings me to number 2, which is it doesn't necessarily needs to be a framework, but set up something that makes it clear, especially to stakeholders, why you're making the decision you're making, why you are accepting one feature over another, why you are selecting to spend 1 month or 2 months working on something versus another. You could use things like ROI, user impact, the feasibility of it. There's many things you can do, but have something that allows you to also explain to others the thought process. And obviously, collaboration again. Engage with the stakeholders, engage with the engineering team, with marketing, with sales, with whoever is part of your area of influence, and even beyond it, to actually align in those product priorities. People understand what are the goals of that product, that we are working towards a common goal. I'm going a little bit fast because in the end, I will have a little bit more time to ask you questions, or for you to ask me questions too. But if anytime you want to ask a question, be sure to stop me. We have time for that. So collaborating. Collaboration is something that, as I mentioned before, is important. And I already mentioned it in certain points, but I thought it was important enough to have a separate slide only to talk about it. So I don't know how much more I can say that collaboration is important in this role, because you're not the manager of these teams, right? You need to be able to succeed in this role. So being kind of a servant leader without actually being the boss. You're not a dictator. You should not be telling them what to do. You need to convince a lot of times the engineers and the people around you that this is the right thing to do. And a lot of times you might be wrong. So you need to be able to collaborate with them, to actually come up with a solution, not necessarily that everyone agrees with, because that's not the point. The point is that everyone can even, sometimes people can disagree, but they need to be able to be committed to the solution, right? So you can disagree and commit. That is something about conflict resolution that is inevitable in any team, in any product, and you must be able to actually, handle this thing, the conflicts between your own team, your own product, prioritization, the stakeholders. This is very common to have a group of customers saying one thing, the stakeholders saying another thing, your team saying it's not feasible. And this is something you need to be able to thrive in. And I should have come down, that you need to be able to thrive in. So yeah, I think I said what I wanted to say about this. So other points, I already, some things are repeated because they are important enough to be repeated. In this case, product vision is another one. I want to say how important it is to sell the dream. So the product managers, as you can imagine, have a challenging task. I already mentioned several things that are challenging here. In a point after, I'll mention some of the actual challenges or the most common challenges I see as a product manager. But one thing you can do, and you must do to be able to thrive as a product manager, is to sell the dream to your own team, so the developers, testers, QA people, whoever is working in your team, but also the stakeholders around you, your own managers, your own customers. You need to be able to sell the dream. And that can be doing product demos. It can be actually, having engagement directly with the customers, having presentations to support that. But however you do it, you need to be able to sell the dream. These are just some examples how you can get to that. Some examples that you can have in your toolbox to actually reach this goal. And this brings me to the challenges, because I was talking about that. And in challenges, there's many more than the ones I'm going to talk about here, obviously, as in any role. And some of these might actually be, if you're a project manager, or if you're have a management role, you probably see a lot of this in common ground with what you do every day. But PMs these are the ones I think are the most important ones for PMs. Some of them might be a little bit under the surface, actually. One is obvious, we already talked about it, unclear priorities. There is always conflicting priorities. Sometimes they're unclear, sometimes they're conflicting with each other. And this is one of the main challenges you have as a PM, is to actually be able to, and you will be accountable for it, right? There's this saying, if you will, in product that when the product succeeds, is everyone is responsible for it, but when it fails, it's the PM's fault. And in a way, it is because you are the accountable person in the end to make the decision, regardless of what it is. Scope creep. This kind of will probably talk a little bit about that on the project side, but it is something that can happen and will happen for sure in product too, because the backlog just keeps growing and growing and growing. If you don't manage it, if you don't actually understand what's the value behind it. And that's why I mentioned before that the framework can help, because you can actually go and say, instead of just saying, it's in the backlog, you can go and say, it's not going to even be in the backlog because we have this framework and this is how we make decisions. And this supports that, whatever thing you're asking doesn't make sense for, at least the next year or so. Regulatory changes. This is something that it's maybe doesn't bring up so much in the PM in general, I guess, but it's always behind the scenes. And I remember being thrown to this with the GDPR in Europe. If you're in the US, there's other terms for it. I know California or something regarding this about data protection and privacy. But this created a turmoil of legal and product changes that I had to do in the company I was at the time when this was introduced. And no one really knew what to do. A few months or even I think a year later, the company actually had a lawyer being an expert in GDPR that we can actually exchange ideas and and if our features actually were in line with the GDPR. But this is something that is an example of stuff that you need to be on top of, or else it can create problems. And it can create a disruption in your product. And also in disruption, there's the market disruption. So there's always new entrants, disruptive innovations that can come and cause your products to be rendered useless if you're not on top of it. So obviously you cannot control all of it, but you can be something that you can be on top of in the competition analysis that I mentioned in the beginning, something that maybe we do it once and we say, yeah, we have a nice page or a nice Word file somewhere that mentions this is our competition, this is what they're doing. But if you're not always on top of it, that competition can move very fast and disrupt you without you even noticing, or even a new market's interest, a new entrant can do that too. So these are some challenges PMs face. Some tips. For you, if PM is something that you want to do, I don't know if you have an actual product manager in the room today. Maybe you are actually doing some of this without even noticing. And that's something I did notice in the short story I told you, that throughout all my career, a lot of times I was doing product management without noticing I was doing product management. So this is something you can also take, even if you're a small business owner too. So stay close to your customers. This sounds obvious, right? But this is something that it's one of the main things about, for example, customer-centric approaches and very focusing in listening to the voice of the customer. You probably already heard this term too, but it's never enough to say to tell everyone, stay close to your customer. Because if you go to any company, any product management team, and you ask, when was the last time you actually spoke to a customer? I guarantee you this very often, either never, or because it's someone else's job, like sales or whatever, or they have like some channel that brings them the information. That's not enough. I'm sorry to tell you. You should, if you can, of course, there's certain situations and certain areas that you cannot even contact the end customer. If you're, B2B, B2B, sometimes it's a little bit harder, but still, you need to be able to stay close to the customers. Another tip, never stop learning. And this is true for everything, right? But in product management, I've been, officially, let's say in this role since 2014, 15. And it's not a lot of time, but it changed so much. And I'm sure if I ask here in this group, how long, when was the first time you heard this term? It was not that long ago, maybe at least in the regards of how it is used today, right? The terms kind of fluctuate, there's up and downs. I remember when I started with Agile, everyone was like, hey, Agile is cool, there's Scrum. And I remember, people even from SCI telling me, this is basically a lot of things are from XP, and that has been in the engineering world for so long. So still, it's a constantly evolving field, and keeping up to date without what's going on, what are the latest trends, is very important, obviously, in any line of business, but especially in one that is as new as this one. And I say that with goats, obviously. Being empathetic. This, for example, is not something that is easy for me. I'm not a very empathic person in general, but it was something I needed to work on to be able to be a good product manager. And one of the things it helped me to do that was actually doing the user research myself, or with some help, but being there in the room and seeing the difficulty or the problems the customers of the product I was building were having. So that is something that will help you too. There's many ways. Maybe you already do this very well, and if you don't, it's one way of doing it. And again, preaching to the choir, be data-driven. The numbers can tell a great story if you know how to put it. And again, maybe here I'm telling the group of people here know how to do that, but it is something that will help you a lot in your career in product management if you know how to do that. So, and with this, we arrive to the two cool bonus slides, which was the epic battle. Sounds cool. Is it though? So first of all, is anyone here a product manager by, is your daily job being a product manager? Anyone in this group? I don't think so, looking at the names, but I don't know everyone. I think not, but I'm assuming a lot of you already know about, how Scrum and Agile product ownership brought a lot, at least in Europe. Product owner became the #1 role for so many years. If you go to LinkedIn, because of Scrum, nowadays is more product manager again. But I wanted to address this because it's something that it is a bit of a problem in the product management world. So I'm gonna let you read a little bit about being product manager, what a product manager versus product owner is. And I focused in 3 things: responsibilities, stakeholder management or visibility, and the influence that these 2 different things have. I'm gonna give you 1 minute to read through this. Maybe I should take off the highlights so you can actually read it. Here we go. So obviously I have an opinion of what is what and what's the best approach. And I had big discussions with a lot of people about this. But I'm gonna let you read through it. Then I'm gonna do something similar in the next slide. And then we're gonna pause to talk a little bit. So is it clear only with this, or with your background, or with your previous knowledge already of these 2 roles? What is the differences? Or what are the differences?
Cesar, I have a question. It's Julia.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. I understand the differences, but is there a benefit to having them be different people, or can they just be different roles that the same person has, like different set of responsibilities?
That's a great question. I want to dive into that. And well, I was fishing for that too, obviously. But I'm going to leave that for the last bit after I finish, because I think it's a great topic of discussion. But let's put a pin on it, okay? Because then there's the product manager versus project manager. Which
I was going to add
similar questions.
Project manager list, product manager, project manager, product owner.
We're going to talk about that. But then with that, I'm going to take the opportunity to go to the next slide, which is the PMs discussion. So in this case, product manager and project manager. And in this, I thought about Obviously, there are two distinct roles in many organizations. They, often work closely together to bring products to market. I've seen that happen. There are some overlaps in the responsibilities here, but there are also, key differences, particularly where they focus on, project manager. A project normally has a middle, a beginning, and an end. A product can also have that, but normally is, longer. I'm gonna do the same thing I did before. I'm gonna give you a minute to read through it, and then I'm gonna ask a similar question as before, and then we're gonna stop and talk about. So I have 1 minute to read through it. You might not agree with everything that is here, and this is not my expertise. I literally copy-pasted some of this from responsibilities I saw from project manager and product manager, just so people can, just to generate this discussion. So you might not agree with one or two bullets. That's not the point. It's more like the actual roles discussions that I want to dive into. But I have 1 minute to read through it, and then we'll talk about it. Let me just do a quick time check. So, okay, I think we're right about on time. Okay, so I provided the time to go through it again. The point was not discussing the individual bullets, but I will have a similar question now. So is it really clear now what a product manager is, what a product owner is, and what a project manager is? What are the differences between them? So I'm assuming no, but what I want to tell you, and this is the key thing I want to leave you with, if you remember one thing about this talk, about the 10 key things about being a product manager, is the product leader. An exceptional product manager is all of them. Is someone that wears many hats and does whatever needs to be done to actually bring the product to success. Some people call it the CEO of its own product, the product manager or the product leader. I like product leader more. I don't like the manager name. And this is something you might have heard before already, this term, the CEO of its own product. It's not far away from what the best product managers out there are. And this is something that for me is very dear to me. I've saw so many different ways to do it. And we're going to go to Julia's question after and then open this for discussion. But the product leader wears many hats. And at one point, you will be a very, very detailed project manager. At some points, you might be a very hands-on product owner, actually working being in the meetings. If you're using Scrum, obviously, hopefully, because that's part of the discussion that we're going to have after. But for me, a product owner is just the role within Scrum, normally done by product managers, but can also be done by anyone, basically, from the business. And an exceptional product leader is someone that wears all of these hats, that just does whatever needs to be done to actually bring that product to success. So that's dream big. So that's the final bit of the final point I wanted to leave you with. And with that, we're going to go to just one little bonus, because I did mention there was a bonus slide about what is it not? What is the product manager not? So the product manager is not a superhero. So even though you need to be, I just told you that you should be all of them, you are often called to do the impossible. And this is something that you can't do not everything on your own. You cannot do everything on your own. I see some junior PMs fail in the past because of this, fail in the sense that they almost did like themselves to burnout because they were trying to do everything on their own. You must rely on your team. You must rely on the people around you. You don't need to do everything on your own, and you should not do everything on your own, because that's not how you build a great product. There's this, even Superman and the Justice League, right? You cannot do everything on your own. Maybe let me just put here the highlight, because I think the spotlight is nice for this. Here we go. A product manager is also not a dictator. You are a servant leader. Yeah, you need to keep you're a diplomat. It's even a better term for this. You're a diplomat. You need to keep everyone's interest in mind, but you need to move the product forward. So you are not making all the decisions, but you are being accountable for them and to say to why you arrived to that decision, why did the team arrive to that decision. You are also not obviously a project manager. You might be overseeing projects, but your main focus is the product. A product can have endless projects, but your focus as a product leader is in the overall strategy and vision, not necessarily on the Gantt charts that are being done for that project themselves. You should be a visionary, not just, I literally saw this happening. There is this, one of the team members of one of my earlier teams when I was starting my career as product owner, so back in 2015 or 16, told me that the product owners in this company are glorified backlog administrators. And he was right to a certain extent, because I did that work a lot with the team to actually get us to a point that we could do much more than that, to actually talk with the customers, to actually be accountable, to actually be able to drive the decisions and not just being told what are the next features on the next version of the product. And you're also not a salesperson. Obviously, for the product to be successful, it needs to be selling, but you are a product advocate most than a salesperson. You should be helping the sales team understanding why your product is the best solution for their customers. Okay, so that is a wrap. I think we have some time we have a bit of time to address your question, Julia, and some others if they pop up. But some I'm going to jump over this, I think, because I just see that it's 41. So nothing. It's just a small recap what you should be thinking about next. And to stay connected with me, there will be a link you can click on the PDF version. And this is me. So let's go to the questions. I'm going to go back, Julia, because you asked about. Actually, no, I'm going to leave it here because I love this slide. It's so simple. Your question, Julia, was about the product. Let me put your faces back on because I was seeing only my. How do I do that? Here, I can see you now. Okay. Hey, so many people. So, product leader. Your question, Julia, was about the product owner versus product manager, and I obviously have an opinion on that, and it's not something that I've been doing this a while, but there's maybe thousands of people that have more experience than I do, and I follow one of them very closely, which is Martin Kaizen from the Silicon Valley product group. He's very famous in Silicon Valley, and he's a thought leader, let's say, in product. And he has a little bit of a, let's say, strong opinion on that. And my opinion is not so strong because I did see it happening in some companies I was working, having both a product owner and a product manager. And in this scenario, the product owner was working directly with the team. It was a Scrum team, obviously, and he was in charge of how things were being accomplished. But the product manager was the one actually doing everything else that you saw here, mostly focused on the outside, not working with the team, but thinking about everything else. Is it the best case? You're already seeing a problem, right? Because these two there's only one line between these two. And the problem is that whatever is happening here in the product management world, so in the part of listening to the market, to the customers, to the stakeholders, and actually deciding what to do and bringing this to the team, can create communication problems. And also the team loses kind of accountability, or they kind of become mercenaries, right? Because they're just building what people are sending to them. They're not missionaries. They're not the ones actually believing and deciding on what is being built too. And that's where I feel it's, and where I saw working the best product companies out there, and there's many examples of that, is that the team needs to believe and see what they're building is actually making an impact, and they need to be able to actually decide on it too, because then they're just, if not, you lose a little bit of connection to what the product is. It can work, but it's probably not the best, I will say. I do have somewhat of a strong opinion that a product manager and a product owner should be the same person and should be one role only. It's a job, right? It's the same as you're saying, you know, I'm a basketball player, but then you have positions within it, and that's your position is not what you are. It's not your job. It's what you're doing at that moment.
So
I think that sports connection makes sense. No,
there are also some questions and comments in the chats. So I just want to highlight those. So
I cannot see that. Why?
No, I think if you go to your little Zoom into it's fine. So the first a comment, and it had to do when you were showing the product owner and product manager slide. It just said, "This is interesting. The roles are reversed at my product owner is higher than product manager." So then there's a question, where does the program manager fit into all of this? And then there was a question like, what do the program managers do in your experience? Haven't heard that role. So do you want to talk a little bit about how program managers, like what that role is and how that fits into this hierarchy of responsibilities?
I think the first comments we kind of addressed a little bit while we were talking about the PM versus PO thing. So and if you don't think so, please interrupt me, but I think I'm gonna jump to the program manager part. And I remember, I think I want to see you guys again, but now I only see the chat. Here we go. I think we talked a little bit about this, Julia, because you did ask me, I think, this question before. What about, you know, program management in general? I don't touch it here because I don't think they are mutually exclusive. You can have it, and you probably should if you have a lot of programs going. It's kind of a level above, right? If you have a lot of products going on, if you have like a big portfolio of products, a lot of things happening, you need someone to focus on that too. But my own experience, even in bigger companies, like the last I was, TF Education First with 52,000 people, is that you can have that at least until a certain point with the product team infrastructure, let's call it like that. If you have the topologies of the team set up properly, you can define who is responsible for what within the products and that you're working on, and the teams that are working on that, without having that specific role. You're probably doing that. You are doing the program manager as the head of product management, for example. You probably are. Do you need a separate role for that? It depends. Are you big enough? Maybe you do need that. But again, don't take my word for it. If you really don't agree with that, just, you know, don't be scared of saying that and saying why you believe you should have that in every case. Maybe you should. But in my experience, especially working in small, medium companies, the only one big enough to have that role was this last one. And I don't think we had any need for that, at least in the setup that we had, which was very much the high performing team from this Marty Kagan and, you know, Spotify model type of stuff, where you have the Scrum teams all focusing in specific areas. So again, there's many ways and many different ways of doing the same thing. And I literally just was before saying this in the meeting we were before, which was doesn't matter for this discussion, but I think we go in cycles of how best practices are. Yeah, I mentioned the XP thing, and you know, you're kind of recycling the good practices and calling it different names as you move forward, right? You probably already saw that many times. Probably all of you have much more experience in software than I do, and you've seen this all over again. If you pay attention to what actually is being done, it just cycles. But yeah, I digress. Sorry. Was there any other question in the chat? I don't think so.
No, I think Jeff Polcini, do you have a question or comment?
Oh, well, first of all, I think, Cesar, you did a great job on the presentation. I really, a lot of this really resonated. And your comment about recycling things, I was just thinking about 3,000 years ago, some wise man said, there's nothing new under the sun. And it's true. We kind of keep trying to solve the same problems, you know, and doing slightly different things. I also agree, you know, smaller companies the lines really blur. You know, having a product manager and a product owner and a product this and a, it's just too complicated for a small company. And in reality, a good product owner is keeping his pulse on things. And then the third thing, I think the point you made, and I would concur with, is that this is a group participation project. The minute we start to silo these functions, we have a real problem, because you're right, the people that are doing the coding just become mercenaries, and that it's just, that's the worst possible job I can think of when it comes to developing a project or a product. And so all of these things, making the distinctions you did, empathy for the people who are using this product. I'll say if you can get the developers on the factory floor, so to speak, to see this, that's absolutely important, because now they can see the pain and suffering that goes on, as well as the rewards of what they've done. So that's excellent. I think the other thing that popped into my head was framework for decisions. One of the big problems we have in any organization is prioritizing not only the backlog, but the demand for the services that our developing groups need. So how do you prioritize this? And this idea of developing a framework that everybody says, yeah, I can see why we're doing this as opposed to that. That really was, I think, excellent points.